Hi, Tracy. How are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome to another update,
Yes, yes,
immigration
I'm good.
update.
And you?
I'm
Yes,
doing very well. Thank you very much. So thank you
yes.
again for joining us and for giving us some South African immigration updates. We want to tell our listeners where we are currently in the country, what's been going on, and your thoughts as the South African immigration specialist. I really want to start with, the borders open. International borders opened October 1st.
It's all all the African borders between the African countries, the neighboring countries are open. And most of the borders are open throughout the world. It's just that, depending if the country is red flagged, then depending on the foreign national situation or circumstances, they need to get permission prior to coming into South Africa. That is from the red flag list. So there's a list of 22 countries. There were 60 countries,
Yeah.
and it's been minimized to 22 countries. And so people coming from those 22 countries, those countries, for example, where they were visa exempt, like US citizens and UK nationals, if they now want to come into South Africa just purely for a short visit, they need to first approach the Department of Home Affairs and request permission to enter. And the department is not generally considering permission for just if you're coming in for a visit. If you're coming in for things like a business visit or possibilities of investing money, etc., then they will consider allowing you in. What is also interesting is that they've said that if you own property in South Africa and you're coming from one of those high-risk countries, and it's one of the high-risk countries that are possibly visa exempt, if you can prove you own property, then you can come in on your visa exemption without any permission. You've just got to show proof that you own property, and of course your negative COVID test had been done less than 72 hours prior to arrival.
Right. So there's still the COVID protocols that they have to cover, even if they are visa exempted. I also understand that a period of if people are coming for 3 months or longer, they still have to apply for this and motivate for that through that email address that I think was released within the new update from DHA. Have you had anybody personally ask you to send anything for special permission to that email? And have you heard whether it's efficient and how long they take to give you an outcome?
I haven't had any cases where clients have asked me to get that permission for them, purely because, as I say, clients generally, if a client wants to come here for more than 3 months, most of those clients actually do have property here. So in those instances, if they have property, they don't need to get those permissions.
Yeah.
However, those, my colleagues in the industry, some of them have attempted to get those permissions, and some of them have said they've got it in record time, and others have said by the time their client needs to travel, they still didn't have the permissions. So, that is a bit of a challenge where you need to get special permission. And for example, if you're coming from a visa exempt country and you don't own property and you're just coming in for a visit, as I say, for business or something, you've got to get that permission. But there is the likelihood that by the time you need to travel, you won't have that permission. And one of my colleagues actually said she spoke to an official at the Department of Home Affairs, and she said to them that this client doesn't own property. They didn't get their permission in time. Can they come in? And the lady at the airport, the lady at the immigration, the Home Affairs official said to her, well, that will be determined at the airport. So my colleague said to her, but that's not sufficient answer, because I cannot tell my clients come in and they could be turned away at the airport.
Yes, of course.
So that was the last conversation regarding a specific client.
Yes.
What clients can also do is, if they have the time and the financial resources, if you're coming from one of the red flag countries, let's say for argument's sake, you're just coming to visit from Spain, you can go to a country that is not on the red list. And if you spend more than 10 days in that country, you can then enter South Africa as per normal, just with the COVID-19 protocols. So for argument's sake, some people, if they, as I say, if they have the time and the financial resources, they'll go to another country in Africa and spend 10 days in Kenya or Mozambique or Mauritius or something like that. And then they'll come in. And I asked, unofficially, I asked an immigration officer, if they come in, are they going to be allowed in if they've got proof bio stamps in their passport that they were in one of those non-red flag countries? And he said what he recommends besides the stamps in the passport, so I don't know if they feel that the stamps is always not authentic,
Yes.
they would prefer that the foreign national also shows some other proof that they were in that country, like purchase of something at a shop,
Yes.
and photographs, or maybe
accommodation. Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of rumor that this whole red list is going to be done away with.
Yes.
So we'll see. You know, there is appeals for them to do away with the red list, because they're saying if you're coming from a high risk or non-high risk or a high risk country and you've done a test and you're not positive, why wouldn't they let you in?
Yes.
It doesn't matter which country you're coming from.
Yes.
So this is the type of arguments that have been brought forward, and we'll see if they do scrap the list entirely.
All right. Well, we'll wait and see what happens there. So just going back to this, you know, the borders opening, particular foreigners are still not allowed to come as there's still this high risk country list. But in the interim, before the list potentially will be scrapped, there are the business travelers that are allowed in, but it also says critical skills, but it doesn't mention any of the other work visas. How can people interpret that?
Our interpretation is that anybody, and this has also been unofficially confirmed by Home Affairs officials, anybody that has a valid long-term visa is allowed to enter, irrespective of whether you're coming from a red flag country or not. So critical skills is one of them, but it is also, if you have a general work visa, an intra-company transfer, a retirement visa, a study visa that's valid, yes, and you come in and it's still valid, they're supposedly going to allow you in.
Okay. So the update that only specifies critical skills, it can be interpreted that it's actually inclusive of the ICP, general work.
I think that critical skills, maybe they were using it as an example more than specifically, yeah.
Right. And then what about those foreigners that are still in South Africa, Tracy? What about their extensions if their visas expire now? Are there any concessions that are in place right now for those folks?
Yes, look, anybody who's currently in South Africa and whose visa expired during the lockdown, and we're still in lockdown, is automatically valid until the end of January 2021. So there are, say, if somebody needed to apply for an extension and they were only asking until December or January, there's no need for them to do that. They're also not accepting normal visitors visa extensions if somebody's here, because they're saying you would be asking for 3 months and we're giving you 3 months anyway until the end of January. So they're not accepting if somebody comes and says, I want to extend now for 3 months. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the current situation. Obviously, if there are people that are here, say, on an intra-company transfer work visa, they've had it 2 years and they want to extend for another 2 years. So they've got basically then between now and end of January, well, you're supposed to do it 60 days before, but technically the visa is valid until end of January. So before then, preferably 60 days before, they should apply then for the extension, or if it's a study visa, etc.
Right. And then what is the current trend for new applications? Are you seeing clients now wanting to plan for either the end of this year or for early next year to bring folks in? And how are the embassies that have recently reopened in VFS? What is the current processing looking like for those who'd like to plan?
Yeah, so the VFS centers and the embassies outside South Africa also only opened in the last few weeks. And they are accepting applications as per normal, as they were in the past. And obviously every application will be assessed on merit, and if it's granted, then they can come into the country. And there are people starting to come in. There hasn't been a huge influx because I think there are still concerns about the pandemic in South Africa and in their own countries, and but there are people starting to come in. It's not as it was, this is like the new normal, so it's not as it was last year this time.
Right.
But people are starting to make plans to come in and wanting to be here for a variety of reasons, and are applying for visas in the various countries. Yes, and there was probably a week or two ago where some embassies were saying, we're not accepting applications, we're waiting for instructions. But there's a lot of teething problems still happening, and I think slowly but surely they're all starting to realize, well, we're now taking applications and we process as per you.
And you're saying they open applications as per normal, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're processing them normally, are they, or are they?
They are processing them as well.
Okay.
Look, obviously, if one now applies and you're coming from a higher risk country, they might take your application in but say, well, we're not going to process it yet because we're waiting for you to come off the red flag list, or whatever the case may be. But they're taking in their applications and they are processing this. I know of somebody who got a work visa now in the last week or two from one of the countries.
Okay.
So it is, yeah.
Well, that's very promising. At least then, you can advise your clients accordingly that processing is happening, irrespective, and officials, I'm sure the day-to-day is still trying to proceed as normal. Are the VFS offices locally, are they backlogged at all?
Not really. Surprisingly, since they opened, it hasn't been crazily busy going in there. I think probably because, look, in terms of backlog, they were closed for several months, so that gave them a lot of time to get their applications sorted out, anything in their office, and Home Affairs in Pretoria was processing, so those applications have come back and people started collecting. But in terms of, we expected a big rush going in there now as they opened, but I think because people have got the extension until end of January, the pressure's sort of taken off a little bit.
I see.
Because now there's no big rush. VFS open, you've got to apply within the next week or two. They have until end of January to apply. So far, so good. It hasn't been too bad at VFS. And I think by the looks of things, touch wood, Home Affairs seems to be on par as well, because we're getting applications back within a few weeks, which is quite good.
Great. Yeah.
So we've got quite a few in that we lodged since VFS opened, and they only opened in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been good. So we'll see how that goes. But it hasn't been extremely busy where you wait hours to be attended to, which we've experienced in the past under normal circumstances before.
Yes, I can imagine. Do you project, or have there been talks on this automatic extension till January 2021 that would be extended, or do you think that they're kind of just going to wait and see how the pandemic plays out in South Africa and make their...
They're definitely going to wait.
Say that again?
Yes. I think they'll definitely wait and make a decision closer to the time. It's way too soon to say whether they're going to consider anything further, because it all depends on the pandemic and how things are going in other countries, and whether those borders are open for people to go into the other countries and go back homes and things like that. So honestly, I don't think at this stage there will be any hint of what they're going to do come January. I do know that there is also, it's just a rumor at this point in time, but there is strong talks about those people who have had intra-company transfer work visas who are currently here and have had it for 4 years.
Yes.
That they're going to consider allowing them to extend it in South Africa for a further 2 years.
Wow, that would be great.
But we're waiting for something in writing in that respect, because that would be good for a lot of people who, haven't been wanting to go out.
Yes. And just a final question regarding the new applications that people would undergo in their home countries. Do you think there's going to be more of a challenge for approvals? Do you think that people will now have to more motivate exactly why they need to be in South Africa, why they're needed in South Africa at this particular time during this pandemic time? Do companies and corporates have to do anything additional to assure a better chance of approval, or do you think they're still adjudicating these cases as they usually do, just on their merits, no special motivation needed? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, there's been nothing, there's been no discussion or hints about that. So I would assume that they will continue to process as they did in the past, because they've got to encourage foreign investment, foreigners to come in, etc. So, you know, if they look at it from that point of view, then they should continue as per usual. And they need to also realize, and I'm sure they know, these embassies, that the economy needs to continue and needs a boost in South Africa. So they need to get these people in and get the wheels turning as normal as they can. So yeah. I think they will process it. You know, there's no hints that you have to have any special, and if they had to reject it to saying, well, you needed to motivate why you needed to be there during this new normal, then that is not a reason for rejection, because there's nothing in writing in that regard from Home Affairs. It can only be special circumstances or etc. You know, or you have to be well motivated as beyond the normal. So there's been nothing like that. Should not have any, you know, changes or expect anything more than the usual.
Well, that's good. That's actually very good news to hear, because I'm sure a lot of people are actually quite concerned. We've received quite a few of those types of questions. You know, do we have to now have this extra motivation? Do we have to tell the government why we all of a sudden need, you know, 10 people and starting a business or whatever? But it's nice to hear that, you know, from your point of view, that things will be processed and looked at and adjudicated as it has in the past. So that probably gives a little bit of optimism to those folks who still are looking to come to South Africa.
And also, it's motivation enough that they've been waiting since the beginning of the year to want to come, and now it's only the wheels are starting to turn and they've already lost time and need to get into, you see. So that in itself is saying, well, we wanted to be here in March or April already, but we haven't been able.
Yes, that's a very good point, actually. That is quite a good, that's motivation in itself, I would say,
exactly.
in that regard. So I totally understand that. I totally understand that. So is there anything, as we sign off, is there anything that you want to share just within the parameters, any advice you want to give folks who are looking, corporates, privates, wanting to come to South Africa at this time? Anything that you would advise them on doing when they're doing their preliminary you know, thinking or actions?
No, look, I mean, as I said, I think all they need to do at this stage is look if they're coming from a country that is currently red flagged, and you know, take it from there, because also and also with them coming to South Africa, they must just be very aware of the pandemic and be diligent to ensure that they follow all the protocols. I think that's very important. There's talk about them needing travel insurance that covers COVID, which was not in the past, although they say at the airport nobody's really looking at that. And also that they also, you know the rules and regulations, because with the inconsistencies and the teething problems that's arising now, if they do apply for a visa and they get challenged at the VFS Center or the embassy, or after the visa is granted at the airport, they need to have a bit of savvy and know a bit of what's going on. You know, it's obviously, if they're using somebody like us, they could always phone us or reach out to us. And then we will say to them, look, these are the rules, you need to push back and say to them that they're out of their scope or whatever. Because as I say, there are many embassies and Home Affairs officials and immigration officers that have got their own interpretation of a number of things, and that's where the frustration comes in. So they've got, my advice is just bear with us, because, you know, we will give the advice that we've, know best, but somebody else might interpret it differently when they get to those counters at the embassy, etc.
Yes, which I think is a long-going problem that I think most jurisdictions deal with when having to engage with government authorities with these adjudications.
Exactly. And now it's going to be a little bit worse, because there's all these new things and people aren't sure, even with the people, if you're coming and you have property, you know, and or going to another country for 10 days, people on one immigration officer will treat it differently to another and interpret it differently. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Well, people just got to do the best they can. Come to us if they need any assistance. Please do feel free to come to us and we'll be able to assist you with all your South African immigration needs. Thank you, Tracy, for taking the time to join us, giving us these awesome updates. I see things moving now nicely. As you said, the wheels are turning. We are finding momentum. And we'll see how things go, but we'll continue to keep everybody updated as we go through these next upcoming months. So thanks again, Tracy. Hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.